Welcome to the MARRT Town Hall Conference Call. At this time, all lines are in a listen-only mode. Later, we will conduct a question-and-answer session. If you'd like to ask a question, you may do so by using the window to the right of your webcast player. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded December 13th, 2016. I would now like to turn the conference over to your host, Corey Campbell. Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I think we're live. So I'm super excited to be doing the very first ever MARRT webinar, so I hope it goes well. If there's any glitches in our audio, please just put a question in and the operator will help us through our technical issues if there is any. But other than that, I just want to say thank you very much for taking time out of your day to listen in today. The session is probably going to last about an hour. We're going to go over the business plan, and in that I'm going to give you a lot of information about what MARRT's been doing over the past little while, and where our vision is and where we're going and for the future. And I want to kind of touch on all the questions that we've been getting from the membership since the AGM in the springtime. So yeah, we'll just go straight into it, I guess. So I'm going to start off kind of just going over the MARRT mission statement. MARRT regulates the practice and continuing competency of respiratory therapists to ensure the safe delivery of care. So every time that the MARRT Board of Directors meets, we keep this in mind. We remember why we're there. We utilized some evergreen questions that are basically decision-making guiding questions for us to remind ourselves what we're doing and why what we should be concentrating on when we're meeting as a group. Self-regulation. So you guys have been hearing a lot about self-regulation lately and a lot of our communications that have been going out to you. We know that self-regulation is a privileged, delegated, sorry about that, to a profession or occupational group by provincial legislature, and it's monitored by the government. So essentially what we're talking about is that the Canada Health Act is a federal statute that states that Canadians have the right to health care. Each province must administer that. What that means is that basically each province has to determine the best way to provide health care for each of its citizens. So one of the ways that we like to do that is to have some specific professions manage how they're going to be structured and what their standards are by creating something called self-regulation. This model exists in a handful of countries only. So basically what it means is those professions that really have specialized knowledge and an external party really wouldn't know or have the knowledge to be able to set the standards of practice for that profession, so they delegate this to us. MARRT exists to protect the public. So it's MARRT's legal obligation to protect the public through regulation of licensed and registered respiratory therapists. So what we really have to think about here is that from the government's perspective, they award the right to self-regulate only sparingly, and when they do, they need to have the assurances that the college is going to function properly and that no shortcuts will be taken. In essence, the public has the right to safe, high-quality, ethical care, and the government has the responsibility to provide this to our citizens. So they have given us the privilege of doing this job on their behalf, and then they monitor us and they check in on us and make sure that we're doing a good job at that. If we don't have the money to do this properly, then we really have no business calling ourselves the regulatory body or the college. It would be similar to false advertising for the public, and is definitely not in the public's best interest if we don't have the funds to do this job properly. So basically the way MARRT is set up right now is that we are a dual order organization. On one side of it, on one side of the coin, we're a college or a regulatory body, and those are the activities that are really stated explicitly in our Respiratory Therapy Act, things that we must do. But on the other sense, we still exist as an association as well, and we are looking out for our members, and we're basically doing a lot of professional advocacy and things like that. So the way we are right now is we're trying to do both jobs, but it's not going to be that way when we come under the RHPA, or the Regulated Health Professions Act. It's going to have to be separated out, and we will then only exist as a college, and then a group of people will have to start an association and do the advocacy work and the membership benefits for members and things like that as an association, and it will be very separate out. So our name is kind of confusing because we call ourselves an association, but our main legal obligatory body duty is to be the regulatory body. Some of the differences, and I know that you're not going to be able to see this very well, as it didn't, but I just want to describe some of the difference between the college and the association. A college membership is mandatory. You don't have the option. This is your license to practice. One lens only. It serves in the interest of the public. We can't be doing things for our members and advocating for our profession and setting out to serve the public, because the lines get too blurred that way. A college sets standards of practice and requirements for entry to practice. It sets continuing competency standards, investigates complaints, and takes action when required with discipline, and is elected by the board of members, and also includes some government-appointed public members. An association, membership is voluntary in the association. So not everybody needs to be an association member. Your association will support, strengthen, and advocate for the profession. Association will do professional development and membership benefits and promotional resources and things like that for its members. It has publications, newsletters, information on new upcoming research, things like that. Usually it's the association which would provide professional liability insurance, and CSRT is our national professional association, so that's why they are able to offer us professional liability insurance at a really discounted rate. And also association members are elected by the board of members. So regulatory business has not always been the entire focus of MARRT, but it is where we're going in the future. We are trying to tighten up how we do our regulatory business. It is their focus, and as we prepare to transition under the RHPA, we really want to get a really strong, tight, consistent way of operating as a regulatory body. So that's where we've been kind of heading in the past year or so. Both of the associations and colleges are going to require human resources and financial resources to be doing a good job at doing both of those things. So who is MARRT right now? I just wanted to kind of introduce the board of directors to everybody. We have an executive and directors, a registrar, an office manager, and we have some committees which are comprised of public members and also RTs. This is going to be posted on the website, just so that in case there's any of you out there that don't really know who's sitting on the board right now, we're trying to make sure that you know who is on the MARRT Board of Directors. So you can see all of us. You can see where we all work in our normal day job or our paid jobs, and also under each person's picture, you can see which committees we all serve on. So you can see right now that many of the board of directors are the people who are populating all of the MARRT committees. Okay, so that'll be on our website if anyone wants to take a look at that a little closer. Our two paid staff members, so Shane and Lee, are our paid staff staff people. Shane, in our new business model, it will be we'll have his EFT increased from a 0.3 up to a 0.4, and that will encompass a lot of the extra work in doing our preparation to transition to RHPA. And Lee is our association manager. She's been with us for a full year now, and she takes care of the day-to-day business for us, for the board, and she will have her EFT increased from a 0.3 up to a 0.5. The duties of her job we've underestimated how much she actually does for us currently, and she's working way more hours than she is currently actually even being paid for. She will be doing a lot of supporting us in the administrative aspects of preparation for our HPA, and she'll also be very much involved in planning and executing the MARRT Education Conference this year as well. So the question we often, as the board members hear, is, so what does MARRT do for me? I just wanted to quickly touch on the things that we do for the members that you may not really think about or really realize. But MARRT determines competencies for entry into practice. So basically setting out what is the minimum a new RT entering into the profession must need to know how to do. We do registration and renewal for your annual license. You do need a license to practice, as we are a regulated profession. We set and monitor through randomized selection audit process the requirements for the continuing competency program. We're working on this currently and doing some updating to that, so I'll talk about a little bit about that as we go forward. MARRT sets the standards of practice, and sometimes we develop some clinical practice guidelines. We have a committee that looks at doing that, and we, in the past, have 2 clinical practice guidelines. One was for documentation, and the other one was for the use of N95 masks. MARRT addresses complaints involving registered respiratory therapists, and we have to take action when a complaint has been investigated, and if there's discipline to be applied to the member. We also provide annual member education forum and AGM currently. So as a dual order organization, we're still allowed to do this, and this is probably the one biggest form of professional advocacy or offering continuing development opportunities to our members that we do. So we do this on behalf of the association side of things. Going forward, when we are under the RHPA, the association will have to take that over and provide that for the members. So ideally, what we would love to be able to be functioning is to have the MARRT Board of Directors kind of steering the boat, having the vision, the leadership, kind of setting the course, making the decisions, making consistent decisions on what's going to be happening within the organization. Staff and committees should be doing the heavy work, or doing the work and rowing the boat. As you could tell from the slide with everybody's pictures, right now we have a lot of our actual board of directors doing a lot of the work on the committees. It's not ideal to have that because they do the work as the committees and then they bring the work to the MARRT Board of Directors for approval. Well, often it's the whole Board of Directors that has actually done the work. So it would be nice to have more variety, more people's perspectives, a little more diversity in our committees. So we're always happy if there's people who are looking to serve on some of the committees, and please let us know anytime if you are interested, because it'd be great to diversify our committees a little bit more, to have the Board of Directors doing more of the decision making. the picture I used in this slide shows one person, kind of the new guy, rowing the wrong way, and basically what I wanted to make the point about with that is that there's a steep learning curve when new members come on to the board, and it takes a little bit of time even just to get up to speed and to understand the work of the MARRT. And sometimes, you know, new people come on and they get overwhelmed or frustrated with all the new jargon and the new things, and all the committees are demanding and need input and things like that. So they might not feel like they're really helping out in the first year or so, but we're trying to work to orientate our board members better and help them and to support them, to make them feel that they are rowing the boat in the right way for us right early on when they first get started. But we do understand that it's not an easy task to just jump into and be completely effective at. So how do we know what to do? We don't just make up all of this as we go on the fly. We do actually have a lot of rules that we have to follow, and we basically do that with our governing documents. So the way we operate is very strictly laid out for us, actually. We have policies, bylaws, regulations, and then our Respiratory Therapy Act of Manitoba. So each set of documents supersedes itself, with the kind of the grand poobah being on top, the Respiratory Therapy Act. So all of the documents have to align with the Act and the regulations, so we can't exactly set out bylaws that contradict our Act, and we always have to be mindful that we are all in alignment, and we do bylaw revisions and policy revisions to make sure that we're doing that. If we start at the bottom, the policies are board written and approved. So that means that the board writes the policies and the board can approve them. We always try to include references in our policies when we're writing new policies, just to give you a sense that we're not just making things up willy-nilly. We're trying to actually have some concrete evidence as to why we think our policies make sense. Our bylaws are board written, but must be membership approved. So we can't change our bylaws without the membership approving it. 2/3 of the membership have to vote in favor for a revision or a new bylaw at an AGM, and the AGM obviously has to have quorum. So regulations are written by the board, but government approved. So that actually has to be approved by government, and as well as the Respiratory Therapy Act was also written by board members back in the day, and it went to the government and got approval there. And currently, the regulations and the bylaws, the regulations and the Act are not open to amendments by the government. So in 2009, the government closed our regulations and our Act to any sort of amendments, because the RHPA will be our new guiding documents, and so they won't even entertain any changes at this time. So we can't apply to make changes to those two documents. So the new legislation, how things will change in the future. The Regulated Health Professions Act. You guys, we've been talking about this for the last number of years at our MARRT education sessions, our forums, and we've been trying to bring in speakers to kind of get our heads wrapped around how these changes will be and what the differences will be under the RHPA. So exactly, I'm going to try to go into it a little bit and explain it a little bit. So it's going to replace, the RHPA is going to replace the current 21 acts of the 22 regulated health professions in Manitoba. There's 22 because speech, language, and audiologists are combined. That's why there's only 21 acts of 22 professions. Each profession will also have its own specific regulations under the RHPA, and the legislation will ensure that all health professions in Manitoba are governed by consistent, uniform legislation and regulations to focus primarily on patient safety. So most of the main body of this document is going to set out so that we all do some aspects of the regulatory business very consistently and in the same manner. Our reporting structure, our complaints and discipline processes, our registrations will occur in the same manner, so that each of us aren't doing things really differently. We're all kind of under the same umbrella. We're acting as consistently as we can in the ways that each healthcare profession must kind of watch over or regulate each of the professions. The way it will be different or specific is that each of us will write our own regulations and will apply for our own reserved acts. So that's where the differences will exist in all the different healthcare professions. But the main duties of things will try to be consistent through all of the professions. So the new document sets out some key objectives, and I'm just going to quickly try to go through those. So the first one, allow professions to be self-regulating. So each of the self-regulated professions in Manitoba currently have all automatically been accepted under the new RHPA. So we don't have to apply. We all already are accepted. But for professions who are not currently self-regulated and seeking the ability to do so, they get to apply to be under the RHPA. So, for example, massage therapists, they wanted to be a self-regulated profession, and they went through the application process, and they were actually granted this right. I think many of you probably have heard or are aware that paramedics in the province are strongly trying to get themselves under the RHPA as well, and they've been working really hard over the past few years to try to do that, so they are still in the application process. Number two, continue to place the interests of the public and patient-client safety at the center of the regulatory process. So one lens, the public must trust that each of the regulatory colleges are acting in their best interests, and we have to build a very trusting relationship with the government and with the public for them to know that if there's anything that is happening with a professional within our profession, that we would take it very seriously and investigate any complaints and apply appropriate discipline if necessary. Number three, more effective public protection by regulating actions or clinical procedures that may present risk or harm. So number three is all about the reserved acts, which I'm going to talk about a little bit in a coming up slide. But there is going to be reserved acts in the new legislation. So I'll talk about it a couple slides ahead. Reduce barriers to interprofessional practice. So basically, they're acknowledging that our scopes of practice overlap, and just they want to create efficiencies in the system and not have just one specific profession being allowed to do one act. If it's something that is in your scope of practice, then we will all respectfully share the duties through our reserved acts. And then number five, foster greater confidence in the provincial healthcare system. So overall, creating these consistencies and having one set out way for a lot of the colleges to operate, by doing that, they're hoping that the provincial healthcare system will be more efficient and accountable to the public. So Reserved Acts. Basically, the Reserved Act approach was introduced by the RHPA. What it's about is basically there's 21 activities that have been deemed to present a high degree of risk to the public. The RHPA limits the practice of these specific acts to certain health professions and the members of those professions who are qualified and competent to perform these acts. No one profession can state that they are the sole profession allowed to perform a reserved act. So basically, when we've looked through them, there's only a handful really that we think that we will be able to apply for. When we apply for some reserved acts, what we're going to have to demonstrate is we're going to have to provide documentation from stakeholders, other colleges, other healthcare colleges in Manitoba, other professions, other national acts or statutes in the other provinces for the RTs who currently have reserved acts. We will need to be consistent with them as well. We need to be able to demonstrate that that our training programs have the curriculum that supports learning the competencies that are necessary to perform the reserved acts. It's going to be a lot of basically consultation with stakeholders and a lot of providing evidence to provide to the directors who will be reviewing this to say, yes, RTs are qualified and competent to be performing this act, and then they'll determine whether or not we are granted the right to have those reserved acts. What else do I want to tell you here? Basically, council regulations may authorize or delegate supervision. What that third block at the bottom there is trying to tell you is basically even if we don't get a reserved act, we may be able to apply to have a delegated act or an act with supervision. So it means that we can still do it, but it wouldn't be included in our reserved acts. MARRT's recent initiatives. So kind of just touching on what we have been working on to date. I wanted to update everybody, take this opportunity to fill you in on what we have been doing. So governance, we're doing ongoing bylaw review and revision. We always have to make sure that our bylaws are in compliance with our act, and we want to make sure that they're updated and relevant and current to how we're functioning today. Complaints, investigation, discipline process. A couple of years ago, we ended up receiving a few complaints about members, and we didn't really have a defined process in place on how to process those complaints. So we worked with our legal rep, and they created a process for the MARRT to utilize so that this becomes a very consistent way of dealing with complaints that come into the college. So that was a big kind of task and a learning process. We gathered the people from the complaints, investigations, and discipline committees and had an education session with our lawyers to walk us through how to process a complaint, and so we're much more equipped to deal with that now than we were a couple of years ago. Electronic documents and templates. So basically, what was our documents were all on typewritten paper, and we were the ink was starting to fade, and we were losing information that way, and we needed to update things and make sure that we had it preserved in electronic fashion. So our association management has been transferring all of this information into electronic formats. As we do that, it's been added to the website so everybody can see everything that we have. So we're ongoing, continuing to do that as we go along. Create a board orientation manual. Basically, we acknowledge that new board members come on, and it's hard to know really what they're supposed to do. To try to make that process a little bit easier, we're doing a board orientation manual and some orientation sessions and some buddying with people who have been on the board for a number of years to try to get people up to speed as quickly as possible so that they feel like they know what they're doing and what's going on. Policy manual review, we do this on an ongoing basis. We review the policies we currently have, make sure that they make sense, and make sure that the board agrees with them, and that we have sufficient references to support our policies, and make sure they're in line with our Act as well. Committee structure, we're constantly it feels like we're constantly looking at our committee structure. We've been doing quite a few call-outs for people to sit on our committees. We've developed terms of references so that when a committee does exist, that they know what they're supposed to do and what budget or what resources they have to do with that, and what kinds of support that we offer them to be able to be functional as a committee. And then standards of practice, or CPG development. So I mentioned the two clinical practice guidelines that we did develop a couple of years ago, and that we do have a committee that's in place to continue work developing some clinical practice guidelines for us. And standards of practice were somewhat outdated, so in the past year we updated or adopted actually the CSRT standards of practice, and that that is a little more current and much more relevant, and you can see them on our website. RHPA. All right, so a little backstory of how this kind of got rolling in the last couple of years. When we were developing our legal process, or when we were working with our legal rep and we were looking at the discipline investigations and complaints process, our legal rep told us that our current act is quite it's quite old. It's a little antiquated, and it's a little bit cumbersome. It is from in the 1980s, I think. So it's 1981. So it isn't really how some of the newer colleges are dealing with complaints, investigation, discipline. We have 3 committees. Going under RHPA, we'd have 2. It'd be a little more streamlined. It would require less legal involvement if we have to go to discipline. We have more options, or in the investigation stage, an investigator would be able to provide more alternative options to dealing with the situation rather than going right to a tribunal or a discipline hearing. So when they explained this to us, we were very keen to then begin work to transition to the RHPA. The sooner we got under that, the sooner complaints, investigation, discipline was going to be a little more efficient for us to be able to do. So that kind of got the ball rolling for us. After that, as the board, we sat around, we just tried to discuss how or what was our next steps and how we were going to move forward, and we decided to enlist some help on finding out what was going to need to change and how our operations would be different going forward once we actually are under the RHPA. And so we enlisted some help from Deanna Williams, who is a private consultant from Ontario. And she did, I sent her everything that MARRT had. She learned about how we currently function. She evaluated our current financial situation and our structure, and she created a report for us, which is for any of you who were at the AGM last year. She presented her report or her findings and her recommendations to us. When she did that at the AGM, primarily the biggest, most significant recommendation that she had for MARRT was that we were going to need more money. If we were going to transition under the RHPA tomorrow, we were definitely going to need more operating funds, and to exist as a college under RHPA was going to require more resources, both human resources and financial. And that's where the ball got rolling, where people, she suggested that our membership or fees or a license fee would have to increase up to $1,000. And so that was where that number came out, and people started really taking note and being starting to pay attention and listen, and it was obviously a shock to everybody, and we understand that because when we got the report, we weren't anticipating. We knew that we needed more money, but I don't think we were actually anticipating that it was going to have to be that much. So surprise to all of us, and we had the information. We probably should have let you guys. What we probably should have done was develop a strategy or a plan to communicate that to you before we just let Deanna go forward and reveal the recommendations without having a plan in place. And we're learning from our mistakes in that way, and we acknowledge that it was a bad communication plan on our part. So. Going forward, we're trying to make amends for that. So going forward from there, after the AGM, business plan. So then we needed to figure out exactly, okay, what were we going to do? So over the summer, we struck a little working committee, and we tried to come up with a business plan, at least for the next year going forward. And that involved some consultation with other regulators in Canada. We talked to the College of Physiotherapists in Manitoba and the College of Nurses in Manitoba, and got some local input to help us to understand where we were at. Shane and I met with the government director who has RHPA, or who looks after RHPA in the Minister of Health's office, to get a better sense of the timeline of when we might be up next to be reviewed to come under the RHPA. So we did a little bit of consulting with people, and we came up with the business plan that was released to the membership in October. Going forward, we are trying to we know that it's going to be not as a fast process. We're probably not coming under it or being reviewed in this upcoming year. They are currently reviewing nurses, and we're told that that will probably come to a conclusion early 2017, and then they'll probably be looking at the physicians next. And then it seems to be whoever is basically ready and has everything ready to submit after that, it will be a first come, first served basis. So MARRT's still interested in trying to come under RHPA sooner rather than later, but sooner is not tomorrow, so that's why the fees aren't going up to $1,000 quite yet, because we don't really, we're not set up and we're not ready to even know how to do that yet, so we're increasing fees in a much slower fashion. We're trying to do it as methodically as we can with as much input and help from people with expertise to guide us in this venture. And we're trying to do a lot of the work by ourselves still. We increased Shane's EFT to a 0.4. He's going to oversee and kind of take charge of directing some of the work that needs to be done through a committee. So we're hoping to get lots of volunteers who want to work on that committee and help us do that work. Okay, next slide. Continuing with what MARRT's been up to the past year or so, continuing competency program. Okay, so we have a committee who's working on this. Our current CPP requirements are outdated and are going to be updated in the near future, I believe, or in the coming years. And we have a committee who's currently dedicated to working strictly on this. And so I don't want to give you too much information about it yet because the committee has, they're still working on it, but just know that your continuing competency credits are going to, the way that the audit, that the credits they'll be looking at will be more defined and are going to be, in the future, they're going to have to be more, you're going to need to have a proof of what you've been doing with certificates and to just be more accountable than just kind of taking your word for it. So basically when you attend a webinar, you'll get a certificate after that saying that you did the webinar, or if you go to a conference, conferences will give you certificates to prove it. So you'll be able to build your CPP profile. And then you'll have the documentation to submit for that, and it'll make the audit a little more substantial, and it'll be easier to audit that way. All right, communications. I would have to admit that in the past we struggle with communications. We are trying to get better at that. We've been updating our website. If you've gone on it lately, there's much more information on it now than ever, and part of that is due to actually having our stuff in an electronic format. We are trying to create video links and things that aren't just all verbiage for you to read. And basically, we're trying to make it more accessible or easy to navigate. The platform that we were working on from before was old, so we had to invest some money to update our platform to kind of keep things looking current. Just saying, overall, getting our website much more functional for the user. Our emails, I know. Sometimes you might feel like MARRT's inundating your inbox with all of our emails. We're still finding that that's primarily the best way to get the important messages out to everybody. On that note, you have to keep your membership profile up to date with your current email address and your current mailing address and all of that current on your membership profile, so that you will get all of the MARRT emails. Sometimes you can even put 2 or 3 different email addresses if you prefer not to get it into your personal email, send it to your work email, things like that. So. And when we did our survey, leading into the next box there, the survey, we surveyed our membership to try to find out and get a sense of how you guys would prefer us to communicate with you. And overwhelmingly, the responses from the people who did complete the survey are still saying email is the way that they would prefer MARRT to supply the important information to you guys. A webinar. So today is our very first webinar. We hope to do more in the future. This allows you guys to listen in the comfort of your own home and have access to the information, so hopefully there'll be more in the future. And the town hall sessions is something that the membership actually asked for. It was overwhelming after the AGM that the membership felt that we needed to do town hall sessions to give in-person updates and allow the membership to ask questions and have a dialogue with us in person. So we did hold 2 town sessions so far, one in Winnipeg and one in Brandon in the past couple of weeks. And now we're going through all the information again in this online version. So hopefully that this addresses some of our communication downfalls from the past. Our strategic priorities. So basically, we've tried to set out what our priorities are. Communication and transparency remain at the top. Separation of the association and regulatory body. We're investigating how this will happen, when it will happen, and it does need to happen for when we want to be under the RHPA. I've been gathering some, I've spoken with some people at the College of Manitoba Nurses, and they kind of are are giving me information about how they were able to do that in their settings. So that's going to be a priority in the upcoming years, of learning how we're going to be able to do that. Reserved acts and regulations. So this will be the work of the RHPA committee to evaluate the reserved acts and try to determine which ones we are going to apply for, and we're going to have to rewrite our regulations. Board education, so something that we believe as a board that MARRT needs to invest in is the people who are serving on the board of directors. Going forward, when we're under the RHPA, that will be called the council. But we need to have all the board members understand the work of the regulatory world, and if we don't invest in our own education to do that, then it's going to be hard for us to be the visionaries or the leaders taking us forward. Governance, consistency, so we want to make sure that we are operating in a governance structure, that we make consistent, defendable, and public interest related decisions with everything that we're dealing with at MARRT. And then CCP, again, I touched on that. We're updating our CCP system right now, so that'll be something that we'll be working on coming future. Another thing that we've been doing the past year is the professional liability insurance. So you know now that you're going to be required to have professional liability insurance. Although it may seem new to all of us, it's not really. It's been around for many, many years, and it's been a requirement of most health profession regulatory colleges across Canada. We're the last RT regulatory body across Canada that is actually mandating it. So it isn't something new. It's been around, and it's here now too. So under the RHPA, the PLI will be mandatory. There won't be any options going forward under RHPA, so that was another reason we wanted to get that started on that now. It's going to take effect for this license year. You probably saw an email come out in the past couple of days. The CSRT is making some concessions for Manitoba people who want to buy this insurance before the new license, the new membership year for CSRT. So they're going to allow that to happen. So actually right now you can purchase your PLI with CSRT without being a CSRT member, and that's a fantastic thing. Proof. You won't be required to submit proof of your PLI unless you're chosen for a random CCP audit, or if you're a new member at MARRT, or if for some reason the board of directors requires it or asks of you that. We've included that statement just in case if for some reason we ever need to ask somebody, then we would be able to do that. Okay, next. Some people have asked us how PLI protects the public, and so it does so by ensuring that they have access to restitution in the event that patient care by a respiratory therapist results in harm to that patient. So basically, if for some terrible, unforeseen reason a patient was harmed by the actions of an RT, and they did require some financial compensation to help them after the fact, they would be able to go after the respiratory therapist and be able to get the insurance money from the PLI that the RT would then actually have. So it's really hard. If somebody did suffer some serious harm, it would be really hard for that patient to obtain any monetary compensation from an RT who doesn't have insurance. So that's the idea of how the PLI would protect the public. So hospital coverage. Just so you know, if you work in a hospital in Manitoba, you probably have or are covered under the hospital policy. So basically, an RT would have their legal expenses related to a malpractice case that goes to court completely covered under your hospital insurance policy, as long as the case doesn't involve accusations of criminal activity. The caveat, though, to this is that your hospital insurance doesn't cover you for a couple of things. And one being the most important, I think, is that if you're personally named in a suit or in a complaint to the MARRT and you would like to hire a lawyer, the hospital will not cover, your hospital insurance will not cover that. So you'd be on the hook for your own lawyer bills if that was the case. And if you actually were doing something outside of the hospital, or if you work at two different employers, and one employer, for instance, your hospital employer does have insurance, but your other employer is a private company and doesn't have insurance, well, your hospital insurance then doesn't cover you for the private company. So that's the other instance where you're not covered. The license fee increase. So kind of been leading up to this and giving you some of the tidbits of the information of why we had to increase our fees. And I'm sure this is the part you're really all waiting for, and this is what you really want to hear about. So basically, forward momentum, we're making a change, we're trying to look to the future, we're trying to anticipate what we're going to need to do the transition to the RHPA. And we've been advised and we understand and we realize that we do need more money to be able to do that. And because MARRT only gets its income from our membership fees, that means the cost has to trickle down to the membership. We're a small college, or we're going to be a small college. We're a small organization now with only approximately 340 members, but it doesn't mean that we're going to be able to do all the regulatory business to a lesser degree. We have to do what everybody else is doing. So we're going to need that money to function in the future. It's the barriers for us right now that we can anticipate or that we can see is that we don't have the resources, the human resources or the financial resources without increasing your fees. So that's why, if that helps you to understand. So this little chart that you see, the red shows cost of or the inflation over the years. And the blue line shows the membership fees. So there was a period of time when MARRT members, the fees weren't increasing as they probably could have and should have been over the years. They stayed very, very low. Everybody loved it. It was wonderful to have license fees under $200 for many, many years. But we weren't keeping up with even inflation during that time, and we lost a lot of revenue during that time because the fees stayed so low. So really low for a long time, really good, but kind of fast and hard increases happening now just to keep our head above water. Why not earlier? Well, there's a few good explanations of why MARRT kept their fees low for a long time. On the first point of that, very few complaints. We didn't have many complaints come into MARRT. Legal fees weren't really being or we weren't spending money on legal fees to process complaints. The complaints that did happen most recently did involve lawyers, on both sides. The person who had the complaint filed against them, those people were hiring lawyers, and MARRT had to hire lawyers as well. So it's just the world we live in now, sort of. We're hearing it from all of the regulatory bodies across Canada from in RT. They're all getting more complaints now. The public seems to be much more aware. They want accountability. So complaints, the number of complaints do seem to be rising. The organization was really truly focused on only association work. I say that because I say that meaning that the association functioned because there was no complaints. There wasn't a lot of regulatory things to do. In this day and age, though, the regulation business is ramping up, and we have more obligations. We have to do more reporting. We report to the Fairness Commissioner. We have to have an annual report. It goes to the government. There are more regulated provinces for RT across Canada. We were the very first back in 1981, but now RT is growing, and it's just becoming more complex. Patient safety groups are being created, and there's more demands on and more focus on patient safety. Labor mobility is a huge issue that we're always staying abreast of. So there's more regulatory work now than there was in the past. So that's partly to support our change in our focus from just the association and start focusing on regulator stuff now. Operations are lean and rely heavily on volunteers. This is true. It always has been of MARRT. Just until a couple of years ago, even MARRT's registrar position was a volunteer position, and because of the workload increasing, because of the complexity of the work that we are involved in, and the dynamic environment that we're in right now, we have to be consistent and educated, and sometimes volunteers with the good best of intentions, without the education or the knowledge to be able to do the job, we can't do the job. So going forward, we're going to need to invest in some consistent staffing for our college. What's costing more? Well, where should we start? RHTA preparation, we know that we're going to have to do much consultation, and it's quite labor intensive to get the documentation to support our application for our reserved acts. So we anticipate increased costs with that. We might need expertise in this field, policy analysts possibly, or consultation with experts in this area, such as Deanna, or the other regulators who are under the RHPA, and consulting with these people, or even just meeting with these people just to talk with them, will cost us some money. Under RHPA, we will have necessary reserve funds. So we've kind of started a consultative process about what reserve funds we're going to need, and basically we've been sort of directed that we would need a special project or therapy fund, a special project fund, a therapy fund, a legal fund, and an operations fund that would be a minimum of 6 months operations to sustain us. Staffing, so that goes along with support and consistency for the college. Number of complaints and complexity, kind of addressed that already. Numbers seem to be going up. They are unpredictable. We don't know. It could be many years again before we have another complaint, and that would be great, but we know that if we continue to have a couple of complaints a year, it's going to cost our organization money. And complexity, if we do have a case that is very complex and does go to a discipline hearing, we're well aware that that could cost us a vast number of funds to be able to process that. So as a college, that's our responsibility. We're going to need to do that. So we need to be prepared to have a complex case, and that's why that reserve fund would be needed. Operational costs. So costs, just basic costs of doing business, rent, internet fees, phone fees, banking fees, the fee we pay to have our financials audited, keeping our staff fees or our staff salaries current with the rest of the jobs that are the same types of jobs, like that. Let's see what else. The National Alliance work. So many of you know that each regulatory body from each province sits at the National Alliance of Registered Respiratory Therapists. What we do together is focus on the work that we all need to do, and we do the big projects together. We make sure that we're all kind of on the same page. For instance, the National Competency Framework. This is a big project that the National Alliance takes on about every 5 years, and what it is setting out the entry to practice requirements for a new RT entering the profession. We just completed the most recent one. It was just released this fall, so we have a new National Competency Framework. That project was very costly, and basically every province kicks in to pay the bill to create that document. The new one is a framework rather than a profile, and in that we are hoping that rather than starting from scratch in another 5 years from now, we'll be able to maintain and make amendments and keep it a living document more than a whole redo every 5 years. So we're going to have to maintain this document, and that's going to take some meetings and some work to do. CORT, this is our national accreditation body that makes sure that each of the educational institutions across Canada who are teaching respiratory therapy are teaching it to the specifications that are necessary for the regulators. So we meet with them. We are engaged in discussions with them, and often we have meetings with them, things like that cost money. CBRC. So this is the body that creates and runs the credentialing exam for respiratory therapy. Again, we work closely with them as the regulators, and this requires meetings and some consultation as well with them. Labor mobility. So labor mobility is something that each of the provinces is keenly aware of and interested in, and it's making sure that we all are assessing international applicants the same, because if you're working in one province, the Agreement on Internal Trade says that if you work in one province, then you must be able to work in another province under that same scope. So we want to make sure that we're all operating and having the same standards in every province, so that if an RT in Saskatchewan comes and works in Manitoba, they were assessed the same way. They have the same skills. They have all the same levels of practice that we would require in Manitoba. So again, all of this activity has been building over the years. As our profession grows and gets more complex and more provinces become regulated, we work at a national level to address all of these regulatory issues. So when we try to determine staffing levels, this is just like a small snippet. We looked at all of the colleges in Manitoba, their membership numbers, their staffing numbers. So basically, we wanted to get a sense of where should we be with our staffing, and currently we don't have the staff that we need, and we're understaffed. So hopefully, as the years go by, we will get closer to what the staffing levels that other colleges have. I just wanted to make a note that the staff that we do currently have is paid in line with comparable organizations. We wanted to check on that. We also wanted to, or we found out or recognized that our total budget is only about 30%, which is very reasonable in any knowledge-based organization. So yeah, we're hoping to increase our staff as we grow. So how do we compare with other RT colleges or regulatory bodies across Canada? With the increase in our fee up to $450, we're still quite cheap, or one of the cheaper, or we're more in line with what the other colleges are paying. What I want to point out here is, remember that each college has its own legislation, so there are different demands on what the regulatory bodies of each college has to, or each province has to do, and also each province has different numbers of RTs practicing or in their organizations. So, if, for instance, Ontario has 3,400 members, they have a much bigger operating budget than we do because they have more members. So just keep that in mind. How do we compare in Manitoba? So I tried to pick out a couple of the smaller colleges in Manitoba to give you an idea of what their annual revenue is and their registration fees. So at $450, you can see we're quite low in relation to the other colleges in Manitoba. I picked out are circled the College of Dental Hygienists because their number or their registration fee or license fee is $460, so it's the closest to what ours is right now, but they have more than double the membership. They have 700 members, so their operating budget is still quite a bit more significant than what we're going to have in this upcoming year. Other fees changing, yes, actually. Late penalty for paying or renewing your MARRT license is going to increase to remain proportionate to the registration fee of $150. And then our application fee or reinstatement fee remains unchanged at $60. So if for some reason you are not being, or you're not practicing for a year, you're taking the year off, you're leaving on a grand worldwide tour or something, and you're going to have a year of vacation, you can suspend or stop your MARRT license fee for that year, but when you come back the following year, the reinstatement cost of $60 would apply. When, so I think everybody probably knows this is all going to happen for this year, for 2017, and license renewals did open on December 1st and will be closing on January 31st. Looking forward beyond 2017, so the MARRT Board of Directors is going to do more strategic planning and business planning as we go forward. The current plan that we set out really is a one-year plan, and we're going to reassess. We still are having quite a strong voluntary component to the new RHPA work, so we're going to try to see how that's going to go along, and then we're going to reassess it. If we don't feel like we're getting enough accomplished with utilizing volunteers, then we will consider hiring somebody or hiring some people to work on that. We know that going forward, our license fees will probably be increased further than the $450. We are trying to do our best to operate in as lean as a lean organization. We're looking for efficiencies, but we need to be realistic in what volunteers can do, and so yeah, we're trying to keep our costs low. We're exploring our options, and we will definitely be mindful of further increase. If further increases are going to be required in the future, we're going to be trying to communicate that better than we did this time. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much that's it. I did go over the hour. I'm sorry about that, and I think that's it from me, but I'm going to give you guys a chance to write in your questions, and I see somebody already has, so that's perfect. Okay, I'm going to read out the question and then try to answer it. Why are Manitoba therapists being compared to other professions in Manitoba? Would it not be fair to assume that compensation levels for these other professions also dictate what their registration fees will be? Okay, so I'll answer the first part of the question first. We're comparing Manitoba respiratory therapists to other healthcare professions in Manitoba because it's each of the healthcare professions who will be transitioning into the RHPA. So each of us as healthcare professions are going to be having to do the same duties, or the same, we'll all have those same obligations under the RHPA. If you mean by compensation levels, the pay scales for each of the professions absolutely have no bearing on how those colleges set their fees or their registration fees or their license fees. basically a college will set their fees based on operational costs. We can't consider what our pay scale is because what we have to do as RTs, as a regulated healthcare profession, to ensure public safety is exactly the same as what doctors do, and they get paid a lot more. So, so that part of it, no, it's not. You can't assume that. I hope that answers your question. If not, write in another one. Is there any other questions? You're welcome. Anything at all. It doesn't even have to. It doesn't have to be anything that I talked about today. Anything that you're wondering about, or even if it's not a question, it's more of a comment. Welcome that as well. Another question. Good. Great. Is the fee of $1,000 still coming? And if so, are other provinces going up to that level as well? The business plan going forward is not clear to us yet because we're still working on that. So I can't honestly answer if the fee of $1,000 is still coming. I do believe that our fees will still need to go up in the future. I don't know if 1,000 is really realistic, and definitely 1,000 isn't what we're thinking of for next year or anything like that. It's hard to know really what it's going to have to be, and really it's going to depend on the structure of how MARRT moves forward. If so, are other provinces going up to that level as well? What I can't comment on what really other provinces are doing, but I just want to again say keep in mind other provinces have their own governing documents and their legislation, and it can be very different from what we're going to be required to do under our RHPA. We've been told, Deanna Williams did tell us that our new RHPA is very much almost a mirror image of what Ontario's RHPA looks like. So I think that our legislation is very similar to those. They do have over 3,000 members, so they're sharing the cost of 3,000, whereas we have to share the cost between 300 or just over 300 members. So I hope that our operating budget won't be required to be as high as theirs, but I think that as time goes on, we'll find out exactly what that's going to mean for us in the future. But in the immediate, couple years, or in the immediate year ahead at least, we are not thinking we have to go up to $1,000 yet. Any more questions? will the association continue to exist? That's a good question. I hope so. I believe that it will exist. It will require a different body of people to begin it or to start it up and to run it. I can tell you that we have been told that as a small profession, provincial associations often struggle for members, and it is hard for them to get going. But at one of our town halls, or at the Winnipeg Town Hall, Neil Johnson made mention of maybe investigating if we could potentially become kind of an arm of the CSRT, a provincial arm of them. So I honestly can't say that I know enough about how to split the association from the college at this point, but that's something that we're going to really start looking at next year and figuring out. I can tell you that we can't take mandatory license fees from our members to create an association, which would then be voluntary. So mandatory fees from the regulatory college can't be directed into opening an association, because the association is voluntary and has a completely different focus. Any more questions or comments? I know I covered a ton of stuff. Okay, another question. Can the possibility of a fee increase be offset dependent on the volunteers who commit to playing a role on the RHPA committee? Yes, I think that is what actually, so that is what we're trying to do. By having a committee of people working on the RHPA submissions and gathering the evidence and compiling all the documentation that's going to be needed, if we have volunteers working on that, then yes, we definitely, that work then doesn't have to be directed to a paid person. So, yeah. Next question. With the change or upcoming change in CCP, will a therapist then be responsible for finding opportunities for continuing education? Yes, yeah, probably. Just as the therapists do all of their continuing education now on their own, or they seek out the opportunities, that is your responsibility as a professional to maintain and keep current and keep your continuing education up to date. If you do have a question, you were listening today and you do have a question, and you don't want to write it in on here, please email MARRT with your questions and we can answer them by email or you can give us a call, and we'd be happy to talk to you in a private phone call if you would like. Are there any other questions right now from any of the listeners from today? Right then. Well, I'm not seeing anything else coming through, so I think that's kind of the end then. We're going to have to wrap it up. Thank you again to those of you who stayed on and listened to the presentation. I know it was long and there was a lot of information there, but I hope that it did answer some questions that were out there. And yeah, so thanks very much for listening, and I hope you have a nice evening. Okay.